Beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara lies a secret river system. This is not a river of water, but a river of sand, concealing the ghostly outlines of ancient waterways. These forgotten paths, called Paleo-Channels, once guided caravans laden with gold and salt across a green and vibrant land. By the end of this journey, you will possess a complete map of this lost world, seeing the desert as a living archive of human history. We will use satellites to see through the dunes and listen to stories whispered by the wind. What erased these bustling highways, and what hidden cities still sleep beneath the earth? How much of your own world is built upon landscapes you cannot see? 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was a world away from the desert we know. Herds of elephants moved through lush grasslands, and hippos wallowed in vast networks of rivers and lakes. This was the African humid period, a green paradise where early human communities thrived, hunting, fishing, and establishing settlements along the water's edge. The very ground beneath their feet was crisscrossed with life-giving rivers, the Paleo-Channels that would one day become the most important secret the desert would keep. These ancient riverbeds were the original highways, guiding both animals and the first explorers across a landscape that was anything but barren. The end of this green era was not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow turning of the planetary clock. Over thousands of years, a gradual shift in Earth's orbit altered the pattern of monsoons, pushing the life-giving rains further south, as climatologist Dr. Peter Domenical explains, this orbital forcing acted like a dimmer switch on the Sahara's climate, slowly turning down the humidity until the rivers began to vanish and the sands began to advance. You can find the echoes of this lost world in places like the Gobero burial site in Niger, where archaeologists uncovered graves of people who lived by a vast lake, their skeletons resting beside tools and harpoons, a testament to a life that revolved around water that is no longer there. These people watched their world change, and they adapted, some moving towards the Nile Valley, their migrations seeding the cultures of ancient Egypt. The rivers themselves did not completely disappear. They left behind wadis, dry riverbeds that flashed to life only during rare, violent rains, and they buried their main channels under mountains of sand. The shapes of these waterways were preserved in the sediment, like a ghostly impression pressed into clay. Tuareg oral traditions still speak of legendary oases, cities of palm trees and springs that were swallowed by the dunes, stories that once seemed like pure myth but now align perfectly with the geological evidence. It forces a powerful question. If you walked away from your home today, what traces would remain after 1,000 years? Would the roads you travel become invisible, buried under a new kind of earth? This is the puzzle we are now solving, learning to read a map drawn not on paper, but in the very bones of the desert. This river of sand is a geological force in its own right. It flows not with liquid, but with billions of tons of sediment, a slow, grinding tide that has filled the deep valleys of a forgotten world. This is the key to the mystery. Those ancient waterways, the Paleo-Channels, did not simply dry up and vanish. They were buried, preserved in a perfect sandy tomb. They became hidden corridors, their elevated banks and compacted gravel floors creating the most reliable paths across an otherwise treacherous sea of dunes. Long after the water was gone, these ghostly riverbeds continued to guide movement, this time for the caravans of camels and people who carried gold, salt, and ideas between worlds. Geomorphologists like Dr. Nick Drake study how these features were carved. During the Green Sahara, powerful water flows cut deep channels into the earth, leaving behind alluvial deposits, layers of sand and silt and fossilized river gravels. When the desert returned, the wind took over, a process of erosion that sculpted the landscape further, but also hid its greatest secrets. We can now see these buried arteries with technology like ground-penetrating radar, which sends signals deep into the earth to map what lies beneath. One of the most stunning examples is the Tamanrasset River, a massive Paleo-Channel system buried under the sands of Algeria. Satellite images reveal its stark outline, a vast branching network that once stretched for over 500 miles, likely supporting settlements along its banks. It was a highway waiting to be rediscovered. Think of the roads you use every day. They often follow the path of least resistance, winding through valleys and overpasses that were established by nature long before the first pavement was laid. For the merchants of the Sahara, these invisible riverbeds were their interstate, dictating the flow of commerce for centuries. Their camels walked on the dry bones of hippos and the fossilized banks of rivers that had not seen water in millennia. How many of the routes that define our lives are still shaped by landscapes we never see? From the silence of space, a new kind of vision peers through the desert's veil. Orbiting satellites equipped with synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, can detect microscopic variations in the Earth's surface, revealing the ghostly imprint of ancient riverbeds. This technology works by bouncing radar signals off the ground, and because the signals can penetrate dry sand to a certain depth, they measure the texture and density of what lies beneath. The data paints a picture of a landscape we can no longer see with our eyes. Pioneers like Dr. Farouk El-Baz championed this approach, using early satellite imagery to identify vast, fossilized drainage systems that traditional archaeology had completely missed. Another powerful tool is LIDAR, which uses laser pulses from aircraft to create incredibly detailed three-dimensional maps of the terrain, effectively stripping away vegetation and even mapping features hidden under shallow sand. By analyzing the mineral composition of the surface, multispectral imaging can also pinpoint areas rich in clay and other sediments that are the telltale signs of ancient water flows. All this information feeds into digital elevation models, allowing scientists to reconstruct the ancient topography and simulate how water once flowed across the Sahara. The discovery of the Garamante Civilization in Libya stands as a stunning testament to this approach. Satellite images revealed a sprawling network of underground tunnels known as fagaras, sophisticated irrigation systems that tapped directly into the water still trapped within those buried Paleo-Channels. This was not a simple nomadic culture, but a powerful kingdom that thrived in the heart of the desert by harnessing the legacy of a greener age. For field archaeologists, the moment of confirmation is electrifying. After analyzing the satellite data, teams travel to these remote coordinates, often finding nothing but sand at first glance. Then, a shovel strikes not loose sediment, but the compacted gravel of an ancient riverbank, or the crumbling wall of a settlement built millennia ago. The invisible highway on a screen becomes a tangible piece of history in their hands. It makes you wonder how many other civilizations are waiting just beneath our feet, their stories silent until we learn the new languages of light and radar. These technologies are our compass, guiding us through the river of sand not as a barren wasteland, but as a living, breathing archive. For those caravan masters, the desert was not an empty space but a map written in invisible ink. Their most trusted routes were not arbitrary, they were the ghost roads, the elevated and stable banks of those long-buried rivers. This was the genius of the Trans-Saharan trade, a network that from the 8th to the 16th centuries connected the gold-rich empires of West Africa to the markets of the Mediterranean. Vast caravans, sometimes comprising thousands of camels, did not fight the desert's geography. They surrendered to its ancient logic, walking where the water had once flowed. The wealth of entire civilizations moved along these corridors. Gold from the forests of Ghana, salt mined from the blistering heart of the desert, ivory and precious slaves traveled north, while textiles, books, and manufactured goods came south. This was more than a simple exchange of goods. It was a conversation between worlds. The great Moroccan explorer Ibn Battuta traveled these very paths in the 14th century, and his writings give us a window into this bustling world. He described the organized chaos of the caravans, the reliance on expert Berber guides who could read the stars and the subtle signs of the land, and the immense trading cities that sprouted at the intersections of these invisible highways. The most legendary of these was Timbuktu, a city that grew from a seasonal camp into a radiant center of Islamic scholarship and commerce. Its fame and fortune built entirely upon its position astride these sand-buried routes. The legacy of these paths is not entirely lost to history. In Mali, the Great Azalai Salt Caravan continues its centuries-old journey. Every year, traders guide their camels across the brutal expanse of the Thames-roofed basin, one of the most forbidding landscapes on Earth. They are following a route that has been in use for 1,000 years, a path that, unsurprisingly, aligns almost perfectly with the traces of a major Paleo-Channel. These modern travelers are walking in the literal footsteps of their ancestors, guided by a river of sand that flows over a river of stone. It forces a profound question. How much of a nation's identity, its economy, and its very soul is shaped by the land beneath its feet, even when that land is completely hidden from view? These caravan highways were the lifelines of empires, the veins through which the lifeblood of commerce and culture pulsed. Now they are silent, their bustling rest stops and fortified trading posts sleeping under the dunes, waiting for the signal from a satellite to tell their story once more. Deep beneath the surface of ancient lakebeds, a silent record of the Sahara's transformation lies perfectly preserved. Scientists extract long, cylindrical cores of sediment, each layer a page in a diary written in mud and pollen. These cores are our most direct window into the climate of the past, revealing the precise rhythm of the Sahara's heartbeat over thousands of years. Paleoclimatologists like Dr. Jessica Tierney analyzed the chemistry of these layers, measuring specific forms of oxygen and carbon, known as isotopes, that act as tiny thermometers and rain gauges. The ratio of these isotopes in the sediment tells a clear story, reconstructing rainfall patterns and temperature shifts with remarkable precision. A dark, organic, rich layer in a core from the Mediterranean Sea, called a sapropel, signals a time when the Nile River swelled with extraordinary rainfall, its waters surging far out to sea. These layers match perfectly with periods when the Sahara was green and the Paleo-Channels were flowing with life. The evidence is not just chemical, it is biological. Trapped within the mud are countless grains of fossilized pollen. By identifying the types of plants this pollen came from, scientists can map the vegetation that once covered the land. A layer dense with pollen from acacia trees and grasses points to a savanna-like environment, while a sudden shift to pollen from desert shrubs tells the story of the Great Drying. One of the most revealing records comes from Lake Yoa in Chad. Here, sediment cores have captured an unbroken climate history spanning over 6,000 years. The layers show a gradual transition, not an abrupt collapse. The slow decline of tree pollen and the increasing presence of dust tell the story of a landscape patiently surrendering to the sand. Dating these events is a science in itself. Researchers use radiocarbon techniques on fragments of ancient plants or shells found within the core, measuring the slow decay of a radioactive form of carbon to assign a precise age to each layer of mud. This painstaking work allows them to create a timeline of desertification, linking the death of a river to a specific century. These climate archives force us to look forward. If a slow shift in Earth's orbit could turn a paradise into a desert, what does our own rapid alteration of the atmosphere hold for the future? The river of sand holds more than the bones of lost cities. It holds a warning written in layers of clay and time. The true test of the river of sand theory lies not in satellite images, but in the soil itself. At ancient oasis sites scattered across the desert, archaeologists have unearthed a world sustained by hidden water. In the Fezzan region of Libya, the crumbling walls of the lost city of Jerma stand as a monument to this ingenuity. Jerma was once the capital of the Garamantes, a civilization that should not have been possible in such a harsh environment. The secret to their success was written deep underground, in the fossil water trapped within the Paleo-Channels. Archaeologist Dr. David Mattingly and his teams have meticulously excavated these sites, revealing a society that mastered the desert. They did not just find water, they engineered it, constructing hundreds of miles of underground tunnels known as fagaras. These sophisticated systems tapped directly into the aquifers buried along the ancient riverbeds, channeling water to their fields and cities. It was a brilliant adaptation, turning the ghost of a river into the lifeblood of a kingdom. The artifacts pulled from the dust tell a vibrant story of connection. In the ruins of a single home, you might find a Roman coin beside a delicate glass bead from sub-Saharan Africa. These were not isolated outposts, they were cosmopolitan hubs, bustling nodes on the caravan highways that traced the invisible waterways. The very pottery used for cooking and storage often bears stylistic influences from distant cultures, evidence of a constant flow of people and ideas. Even the art left behind speaks of a different world. On canyon walls near these oases, rock art depicts scenes that are almost unimaginable today: giraffes, elephants, and crocodiles, creatures that thrived when the rivers were full. These paintings are not just decorations, they are ancestral memories, a testament to a landscape that supported life on a grand scale. Every piece of evidence, from an irrigation channel aligned with an ancient stream to a child's toy found in a courtyard, is a puzzle piece. They force us to ask intimate questions about the people who called this place home. What did it sound like when a caravan arrived after months in the dunes, the air filling with the calls of merchants and the groans of tired camels? What did it feel like to draw cool, clear water from a well that reached down to a river that had not seen the sun for millennia? These communities lived with one foot in the present and one in a deep geological past, their entire existence made possible by a landscape they could not see. Their story is a powerful reminder that the most profound truths are often buried, waiting for a curious mind to piece them back together. The desert floor begins to vibrate, not with the wind, but with the deliberate pulse of technology. Heavy trucks send carefully calibrated seismic waves deep into the earth, while an array of sensors on the surface listens intently for the echoes. Each returning signal is a data point, a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, reveals a stunning three-dimensional image of the world beneath the sand. This is the power of modern geophysical surveys, our most advanced tool for mapping the buried anatomy of the Sahara without ever breaking ground. Geophysicists like Dr. Mohammed Sultan employ a suite of these non-invasive techniques to listen to the desert's whispers. Seismic refraction works by measuring how these sound waves bend as they pass through different layers of sediment. The compacted gravel of an ancient riverbed transmits sound much faster than the loose, dry sand that surrounds it, creating a clear sonic signature of the hidden pathway. Another powerful method is electrical resistivity tomography. This technique sends electrical currents into the ground and maps how easily they flow. Because water, even fossil water trapped in porous rock, is an excellent conductor, these surveys can trace the moisture still lingering in the deepest aquifers, effectively outlining the ghostly course of a paleo-channel long after its surface has vanished. The data from these surveys does more than just draw a line on a map. It reveals the very texture of the subsurface, distinguishing between coarse channel sands, fine silty floodplains, and the dense clay of ancient lakebeds. It can pinpoint the depth of the water table and reconstruct the precise geometry of the river valley, showing how wide and deep it was, and even suggesting how fast the water once flowed. In the Eastern Sahara, these methods uncovered a sprawling paleo-channel system, a lost tributary that once fed vast amounts of water directly into the Nile. This discovery rewrote the hydrological history of the region, explaining how ancient civilizations to the east could have thrived in what is now absolute desolation. For the field teams, this work is a battle against the elements. They describe the immense challenge of deploying sensitive electronic equipment in blistering heat, with fine sand infiltrating every seal and connection. The data collection is a race against time, often conducted in remote locations where a single mechanical failure could halt the entire project for weeks. Yet the reward is a moment of pure revelation when the first processed images appear on a laptop screen, showing the unmistakable trench of a river cutting through the subsurface, a highway for water finally made visible after millennia of darkness. These surveys are the Earth's X-ray, revealing the hidden structures that have dictated life on the surface for thousands of years. It makes you wonder what other invisible architectures lie beneath the streets of your own city, guiding the flow of water, the stability of buildings, and the very foundation of your daily life. These hidden river valleys were the first great highways of humanity. Long before the first camel caravans carried gold and salt, our earliest ancestors walked these same paths, following the herds and the water sources across a landscape that was slowly turning to dust. The movement of people out of Africa was not a random wandering. It was a journey guided by the invisible hand of geography, by the very same paleo-channels that would later define the Trans-Saharan trade. Anthropologists like Dr. Rebecca Grolemund study the languages and genetics of modern populations to trace these ancient journeys backwards through time. Her work reveals how the expansion of the Bantu peoples, one of the most significant migrations in human history, was likely funneled through these greener, wetter corridors during the African humid period. The evidence is not just in our genes, it is lying on the desert floor. Archaeologists have discovered ancient Acheulean hand axes and other stone tools scattered along the banks of long dried-up rivers, marking the campsites of these early travelers. These tools are silent witnesses to a time when families paused here, butchering game and raising their children beside flowing water. The DNA of people from Europe to Asia still carries the genetic markers of populations who once lived in the Sahara, a ghostly signature of a homeland now buried under sand. These climate-driven migrations were not just about survival, they were engines of cultural exchange. When groups moving north from the deep tropics met groups moving south from the Mediterranean, their ideas, technologies, and beliefs mingled at these riverine crossroads. The invention of new fishing techniques, the domestication of cattle, the shared stories told around a fire, all of this diversity was forged along these waterways. During the last Green Sahara period, the door was wide open. People moved with a freedom that later generations, facing a sealed and waterless desert, could never have imagined. This forces a profound reflection. The incredible tapestry of human cultures, from the languages of the Middle East to the traditions of West Africa, was partly woven by the shifting climate of a single region. The very fact that you are where you are today might be a direct result of an ancestor who decided to follow a river that no longer exists. What does it mean for our shared identity, knowing that the paths that led us to populate the globe were written in water and then erased by sand? These channels were more than just trade routes. They were the arteries through which humanity itself pulsed, guiding our species onto the world stage. The ruins of a city like Garama rise from the Libyan desert, a puzzle of stone walls where no city should logically stand. Its existence is a direct challenge to the barren landscape, a challenge answered only by the hidden river flowing deep beneath it. The Garamantes did not just find water, they mastered it, building hundreds of miles of underground canals known as kanats. These tunnels, sloping gently from the foothills, tapped directly into the aquifers trapped within the Paleo-Channels, delivering a steady, reliable flow to their fields and fountains. This was civilization built upon a ghost, a kingdom that drew its life from a river of sand. Historian Dr. Andrew Wilson explains that this engineering genius created an agricultural surplus, which in turn fueled trade. The Garamantes became middlemen, their chariots and caravans traversing the stable, elevated banks of the buried rivers to connect the Mediterranean world with the interior of Africa. Their wealth was not measured just in gold, but in the flow of ideas connecting them to Rome and beyond. Yet this prosperity was fragile, built on a finite resource. The fossil water they tapped was not a renewable spring, but an ancient treasure, the last legacy of a wetter age. As their population grew, they dug their kanats deeper and longer, a desperate race against a falling water table. A series of prolonged droughts etched into the climate records of lake sediments would have been the final blow. The wells ran dry, the fields withered, and the trade caravan sought other routes. The great capital of Garama was slowly abandoned, its people dispersing, its story buried by the very sand it had defied for centuries. The same pattern echoes in the kingdom of Kush, further east along the Nile. Their power was also tied to the invisible hydrology of the Sahara, to the Paleo-Channels that fed the great river and provided routes for their own military and trading expeditions. What does it mean for a society to build its entire identity on a resource it cannot see replenish? We live in a world where we turn a tap and expect water to flow, rarely considering the ancient aquifers or distant snowpacks that supply our own cities. The silent fate of Garama is a whisper across the millennia, a reminder that the most brilliant human achievements are still subject to the slow, patient logic of the planet. The river of sand gave life, and when its hidden treasure was spent, it simply took that life back, leaving behind crumbling walls and a profound question for all who would listen. A new kind of prospector now searches the desert, one that sifts through light instead of sand. These are powerful algorithms, trained to scan millions of satellite images and spot the faint, ghostly signatures of buried rivers that even a trained human eye would miss. This is the cutting edge of discovery, where pattern recognition and machine learning are revolutionizing our ability to read the river of sand, pioneering space archaeologists like Dr. Sarah Parcak used these tools to see the invisible. They train neural networks, complex computer systems modeled on the human brain, by feeding them data from known paleo-channels. The algorithm learns the unique visual language of these features, the subtle tonal anomalies in the soil, the specific curves and textures that betray a buried riverbank. It then applies this knowledge to vast, uncharted stretches of the Sahara, flagging potential sites with astonishing speed and accuracy. The clues are incredibly subtle. A tonal anomaly might be a slight variation in the color of the sand, caused by different minerals in the underlying sediment. A vegetation index, a measurement of plant health from space, can reveal a line of slightly greener, more robust desert shrubs whose roots are tapping into the deeper moisture trapped within an ancient riverbed. The process does not stop with satellites. These digital findings are then cross-referenced with historical maps and traveler accounts, searching for descriptions of forgotten oases or lost wells that align with the newly discovered lines on the screen. A stunning example of this convergence came from Mauritania, where analysis of Sentinel-2 satellite imagery revealed a sprawling, dendritic Paleo-Channel network that had eluded detection for decades. The algorithm traced its path beneath the shifting dunes, a digital cartographer redrawing a map that nature had erased. This work has even opened the door for global collaboration through citizen science projects. Online platforms allow volunteers from around the world to scan satellite imagery from their own computers, tagging potential archaeological features. In one memorable case, a retired teacher in Norway identified a curious circular feature in the Egyptian desert that professional archaeologists later confirmed was a small Roman-era fort, positioned perfectly along a suspected Paleo-Channel route. It forces a powerful question about our relationship with technology. As artificial intelligence becomes more woven into our lives, what other hidden histories might it help us uncover? This digital lens is not replacing the archaeologist's trowel, but guiding it with unprecedented precision, turning the entire desert into a site waiting for its story to be told. The wind is a patient artist sculpting the desert grain by grain. It pushes massive dunes forward in slow, relentless waves, a process that has both erased and entombed the Sahara's ancient rivers. This is the work of aeolian forces, the wind-driven movement of sand that constantly remakes the face of the desert. While water carved the original river valleys, the wind became the caretaker of their secrets, burying them under a protective blanket of sand. Geologists like Dr. Charles Bristow dedicate their careers to understanding this sediment transport, mapping how countless tons of quartz and feldspar are lifted, carried, and then deposited by the endless breeze. The dunes themselves take on distinct forms that tell a story of wind direction and power. Barchen dunes are crescent-shaped islands that march steadily across the plains, while the immense, razor-edged safe dunes can stretch for hundreds of miles, parallel to the dominant winds, creating corridors that can hide entire landscapes beneath their towering slip faces. The relationship between these dunes and the Paleo-Channels is a delicate dance of destruction and preservation. A dune migrating over a dry riverbed does not necessarily destroy it. Instead, it can shield the compacted gravel and fossilized banks from the more destructive force of widespread wind erosion, sealing the ancient pathway in a sandy time capsule. Scientists use a clever technique called optically stimulated luminescence to date these movements. This method measures how long a grain of sand has been buried by determining when it was last exposed to sunlight, effectively reading the last time the dune was on the move. This allows researchers to create a timeline, linking the advance of a specific dune field to the burial of a particular river system. The spaces between dunes, known as interdune areas, are just as revealing. When rare rains fall, water pools in these low spots, and the patterns of drainage can mirror the underlying flow of the buried channels, offering a ghostly glimpse of the older hydrology. In the Grand Erg Oriental of Algeria, one of the largest sand seas on Earth, this dynamic is on full display. Beneath its ocean of star dunes and shifting ridges lies an extensive network of paleo rivers, their courses perfectly preserved under the very material that hides them from view. The wind did not just erase these highways, it also archived them. It forces a profound reflection on the nature of the world beneath our feet. Deserts are not static wastelands, but landscapes of constant, slow-motion change. What other histories are currently being written over by the slow, patient hand of the wind? hidden in plain sight until we learn to ask the right questions. The silent data from satellite surveys and sediment cores finds its voice in the powerful hum of a supercomputer. Hydrological modeling takes these scattered clues and weaves them into a dynamic simulation, a virtual time machine that can make the rivers of the Sahara flow once more. Scientists feed these computers with everything we know: the ancient topography from digital elevation models, the past climate data from lakebed isotopes, and the composition of the buried sediments. The software, often adapted from modern river engineering programs like HECRS, then runs the numbers, calculating how water would have behaved across that long-lost landscape. It is a process of reverse engineering an entire ecosystem, drop by digital drop. Hydrologists like Dr. Judson Parton specialize in this delicate work, constantly refining their models by checking the virtual river's predictions against the physical evidence found in the field, a piece of fossilized river gravel or the specific slope of a buried bank. The model can estimate the discharge rate, telling us how much water surged through a particular channel during the rainy season, transforming a dry map into a roaring torrent. It identifies the vast catchment areas, the sprawling highlands where rain would have collected and funneled into these primary arteries. This is not just an academic exercise, it is a powerful predictive tool. A model that accurately reconstructs a river system can point archaeologists directly to the most likely spots for human settlement, the river bends where ancient villages would have been built for protection and access. A stunning case study comes from the Taibesti Mountains. Hydrological models revealed that a major river system, now completely buried, once flowed north from these highlands, carving a deep valley through what is now pure desert and feeding vast amounts of fresh water into the Lake Chad basin. This single simulation explained how such a massive lake could have been sustained, and it painted a vivid picture of a green corridor that would have been a highway for both animals and the earliest humans. Watching these animations where blue pixels flow across a reconstructed landscape is like watching the desert breathe. It forces a simple but profound question. How many other lost worlds are waiting for us to find the right equations to bring them back to life? These models are more than simulations, they are resurrections, giving voice to a river of sand that has been silent for 10,000 years. The stories told by Tuareg elders around a desert fire are more than just legends, they are living maps. For generations, they have passed down accounts of a land of rivers, of lush pastures, and lost oases swallowed by the advancing dunes. These oral traditions, meticulously documented by ethnographers like Dr. Jeremy Keenan, are a profound archive of the Sahara's green past, preserving the memory of the very Paleo-Channels science is only now rediscovering. One powerful Tuareg myth speaks of the rivers of the ancients, a waterway that once flowed through what is now the heart of Mali. The description of its course, passed from parent to child for centuries, aligns almost perfectly with the satellite imagery of a major buried river system. The songs sung by caravan guides are not merely for entertainment, they are mnemonic devices, their rhythms and lyrics encoding the turns, distances, and landmarks of journeys that follow the ghost roads. A single verse might describe a specific acacia tree that stood near a spring that has been dry for 1,000 years but whose location is confirmed by the presence of a fossilized riverbank just beneath the surface. Bedouin poetry often laments lost cities of palm trees and abundant water, places with names that appear on no modern map but whose descriptions evoke the bustling Garamante settlements that thrived on hidden aquifers. How do these memories persist so long after the landscape itself has been utterly transformed? They are the cultural inheritance of a people deeply attuned to their environment, where survival depended on remembering which dune to skirt or which dry valley offered the firmest footing, because those paths were the echoes of ancient waterways. When a scientific team arrives with a map generated by satellite radar, and a tribal elder points to a line on the screen and names it from a story, the connection is electrifying. It forces a humbling question about our own society. In an age of digital maps that we update without a second thought, what profound knowledge are we failing to pass down? What stories about our own land will be lost when the elders are gone? These spoken histories are not fairy tales, they are the echo of water in a river of sand, a reminder that some truths are carried not in data, but in the human voice. A single block of salt carved from the depths of the Tagheza mines could be traded in the south for its weight in gold. This staggering economic reality was made possible only by the invisible highways of the Sahara. The flow of goods along these Paleo-Channel routes was not merely commerce, it was the circulatory system of empires, a network that connected the resources of one world to the demands of another, enriching everyone in between. Salt, mined from the blistering, waterless pits of the central desert, was a substance of life-preserving necessity for communities far to the south, used to retain fluids in the tropical heat and to preserve food. Gold, panned from the rivers of the Bambuk region, was virtually useless to the kingdoms that controlled its source, but it was the absolute measure of wealth and power for the burgeoning empires of North Africa and Europe. The caravans that carried these commodities moved along the most stable and direct paths, which were, without exception, the elevated banks of buried rivers. Economic historian Dr. Gareth Austin describes this system as a classic case of comparative advantage, where different regions specialized in what they could produce best, and the desert highway allowed for an exchange that multiplied wealth for all participants. The salt slabs from Tagheza and the gold dust from Bambuk were the headline goods, but the caravans carried so much more. Ivory from the great forests, coveted for its beauty and workability, traveled north. Slaves, a tragic but foundational part of this economy, were forced to march these same routes, and perhaps most lastingly, spices, textiles, and knowledge moved in both directions, including new crops like sorghum, a drought-resistant grain that was introduced from the east and would go on to sustain millions. Control over a single node on this network could generate unimaginable wealth, a fact embodied by the legendary Mali Emperor Mansa Musa. His famous pilgrimage to Mecca in the 14th century was an economic event that destabilized markets for a decade. As his vast caravan, said to include 60,000 people and countless camels laden with gold, moved through Cairo and Medina, he distributed so much gold that its value plummeted locally. This was not mere extravagance, it was a strategic display of power, a demonstration that his empire sat astride the most lucrative trade corridors on the continent, all of them tracing the river of sand. So the next time you use a pinch of salt, consider its journey. Could it have been mined from a mountain of solid salt in a sun-scorched wasteland, carried for months on the backs of camels walking on the bones of a dead river, and traded in a bustling city for a nugget of pure gold? These ancient economic currents flowing over forgotten geography shaped the connections of our modern world in ways we are only beginning to understand. These isolated pockets of green are far more than simple watering holes. They are biological arcs known to ecologists as Refugia, where life has taken shelter from the desert's advance. Fed by the groundwater still trickling through those buried Paleo-Channels, these oases create miniature worlds where species survive, isolated for millennia. Ecologist Dr. Pierre Hyrenox has spent years documenting the intricate web of life these areas support, a fragile balance of flora and fauna clinging to the memory of a river. In the stark mountains of Mauritania, for instance, pockets of water called gelters hold a stunning relic, small populations of Nile crocodiles. These creatures are living fossils, stranded here when the Sahara dried out, their survival a direct result of the permanent water sourced from the ancient aquifers beneath the sand. They are a snapshot of a lost world preserved in a rocky pool. The signature tree of these refugia is the acacia, its deep taproot a biological drill, probing downward to reach the hidden moisture of a paleo-channel. These trees are the pillars of the ecosystem, their shade offering respite from the sun, and their leaves and pods providing food for everything from insects to antelope. They form linear oases, tracing the invisible path of the river with a line of green that can be seen from space. These corridors of life become critical highways for migration. The vast Wadi Rimeh Wadi Achim Faunal Reserve in Chad is a testament to this function. This protected area encompasses a major paleo-channel system, and its seasonal wetlands and vegetation provide a vital resting and feeding ground for endangered species like the scimitar-horned oryx and the Dorcas gazelle, and serve as a crucial stopover for millions of migratory birds crossing the desert. How does a seed know to sprout where the water runs deep beneath the surface? How does a bird flying high above a featureless sea of sand know to descend upon a single patch of green? These refugia are not accidents. They are the direct legacy of the river of sand, the last resilient threads of a green tapestry that once covered the continent. They force us to consider the profound resilience of life, its stubborn insistence on finding a way, even when its world has turned to dust. A lone pilgrim, robed in white, does not walk on sand alone. He walks on a river of ideas. The same caravan highways that carried salt and gold became the primary conduits for faith and knowledge, transforming the Sahara from a barrier into a vibrant crossroads of belief. Islam flowed southward with Berber merchants, its teachings carried as a precious cargo alongside trade goods. But this was not a one-way street. Indigenous African spiritual traditions traveled north, and pockets of Christianity, surviving in kingdoms like Nubia, also interacted with these new ideas along the invisible routes. The desert did not erase differences, it facilitated a conversation. Historian Dr. Shamil Jepi emphasizes that these exchanges were often gradual and pragmatic, a slow blending of worldviews in the caravanserais and oasis towns that dotted the ghost roads. The very architecture of faith bears witness to this fusion. In cities like Janay, the great mud brick mosques rise from the earth, their distinctive styles a perfect adaptation to the desert climate, yet their form reflects a synthesis of Berber design principles with local West African building techniques. These structures are not just places of worship, they are monuments to cultural dialogue, built from the very soil of the paleo-channels that made their construction possible. The ultimate symbol of this intellectual flourishing is the legendary city of Timbuktu. Its fame rests not on conquest but on knowledge. At its heart stood the Sankore University, an institution so renowned that scholars journeyed from across the Islamic world to study there. Its libraries overflowed with thousands of manuscripts, handwritten texts on astronomy, law, medicine, and philosophy. These were not static relics, but living documents copied, debated, and carried by traders and pilgrims along the river of sand, spreading enlightenment from one oasis to the next. Think of the languages spoken in its courtyards, a tapestry of Berber tongues, Arabic, and the Sonic and Songhai languages of West Africa. This was a melting pot where legal scholars debated Islamic law while incorporating local customs, where astronomers used texts from Baghdad to track the stars over the Sahara. The very paper the manuscripts were written on, often imported from Europe via North African ports, is a testament to the global reach of this network. So we must ask, how does the landscape beneath our feet shape the landscape of our minds? The same geological feature that provided a stable path for camels also provided a stable path for the Quran, for the cross, and for ancient indigenous wisdom. The river of sand did not just carry wealth, it carried the very soul of civilizations, mixing them together under the desert sun to create something entirely new, something that could only have been born on those hidden highways. The same wind that once buried these ancient highways now threatens to erase them forever. Across the Sahara, the fragile remains of caravan stops and rock art galleries face a slow, silent crisis. Modern wells drilled deep into the earth to support new settlements and agricultural projects are draining the very fossil aquifers that sustain the Garamantes. As the water table drops, the delicate ecological balance of oases is shattered, and the very ground beneath archaeological sites can become unstable, causing walls to crumble into dust. This is a race against time, not just sand. Conservators like Dr. Susan McIntosh work on the front lines of this battle, documenting sites before they vanish. She describes the heartbreak of returning to a location only to find that a single, violent rainstorm has washed away intricate carvings that had survived for thousands of years. The problem is compounded by the footprint of industry. Seismic trucks used for oil and gas exploration can inadvertently crush fragile, unexcavated ruins, while the tracks left by even well-meaning tourists can accelerate erosion, slowly scouring away the past. In the Tassili Ennaja range of Algeria, a UNESCO World Heritage Site often called the greatest open-air museum on Earth, this degradation is acutely visible. Here, magnificent rock art depicting the Sahara's green past is being weathered away by increasingly harsh desert winds and scarred by the graffiti of modern visitors. The illegal antiquities trade fuels another kind of destruction, as looters dig haphazard pits into promising mounds, shattering pottery and scattering human remains in a frantic search for a single saleable object, destroying the context that gives these finds their true meaning. The solution, however, is not simply to fence these places off. Organizations like UNESCO are pioneering community-based preservation, training and employing local Tuareg and Bedouin communities as site guardians. These individuals possess generations of knowledge about the land, and when they become the stewards of their own heritage, protection becomes personal. A young guide who can explain the story behind a painting of a giraffe is less likely to see it defaced, and a community that benefits from responsible cultural tourism has a powerful incentive to report looters. This work is a delicate dance between honoring the past and supporting the people who live in its shadow. It forces a direct and personal question. What history in your own community is at risk of being paved over, forgotten, or washed away? The river of sand carried civilizations for millennia. Ensuring its stories endure is not just an academic pursuit, it is a debt we owe to the human journey itself. A single drone hums over the Libyan desert, its camera capturing details invisible to the human eye. This is the new frontier of discovery, where technology is giving us wings to survey the river of sand. Archaeologists like Dr. Marguerite de la Sablonnière are deploying entire fleets of these unmanned aircraft, mapping thousands of square miles in stunning high resolution. They create digital elevation models so precise they can spot the subtle, raised lip of a buried riverbank or the faint outline of a collapsed caravan shelter. These drones can access treacherous terrain like the heart of a dune sea or a remote mountain pass, places that would take a ground team weeks to reach, if they could reach them at all. The data they collect is then fed into geographic information systems, powerful computer mapping software that layers satellite imagery, drone photos, and geological surveys. A researcher can click on a single point and see its elevation, the mineral composition of the soil, and its relation to known paleo-channels, building a comprehensive digital understanding of the entire landscape. Another breakthrough is hyperspectral imaging, where sensors detect wavelengths of light far beyond what our eyes can see. This technology can identify the unique spectral signature of mud, brick, or compacted earth, revealing the ghost of a wall or a road lying just inches beneath the surface sand. It is like giving the desert an X-ray. The chain of custody for a fragile artifact is now being secured by blockchain. When a potsherd or a tool is unearthed, its exact location, a photo, and a detailed description are logged into an immutable digital ledger, creating a permanent, unforgeable record of its provenance that protects it from looters and the black market. Perhaps the most immersive tool is virtual reality. Using the data from drones and ground-penetrating radar, we can now put on a headset and walk through a digitally reconstructed caravan city as it stood 1,000 years ago. You can stand in a bustling market square, hear the simulated calls of merchants, and look up at buildings whose ruins are now just low mounds in the sand. How will these tools evolve in the next decade? Could microscopic sensors one day be scattered across the desert like smart dust, constantly monitoring the landscape for shifts that reveal new secrets? These innovations are not replacing the trowel, they are extending our senses, allowing us to read the river of sand with a clarity our ancestors could never have dreamed possible. The Sahara does not breathe alone. Its vast expanse of sand is intimately tied to the rhythmic pulse of the entire planet's climate system. The same orbital shifts that brought rains to the desert also stirred the deep ocean currents and rearranged the patterns of ice ages, showing how a local change in Africa could ripple out to affect the whole world. To understand the river of sand is to see it as one thread in a vast global tapestry, where the winds that shaped its dunes also carried its dust across oceans to fertilize distant continents. Climatologists like Dr. Mitchell Crucifix use sophisticated computer models to trace these ancient connections, simulating how a green Sahara could influence atmospheric circulation patterns thousands of miles away. One of the most stunning of these global links is the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation, a slow, cyclical change in sea surface temperatures. When this cycle entered a warm phase, it supercharged the West African monsoon, pulling more moisture deep into the continent and filling those paleo-channels. But when it cooled, the monsoons weakened and the desert advanced. The dust that blew from the drying Sahara became a planetary traveler. Billions of tons of this mineral-rich sediment are lifted by the wind each year, caught by the trade winds, and carried all the way across the Atlantic. This dust is a vital fertilizer, delivering essential nutrients like phosphorus to the nutrient-poor soils of the Amazon rainforest. The very life of the world's largest jungle is partly sustained by the death of a world an ocean away. The Sahara's heat also acts as a massive engine for global weather. The intense thermal low pressure that forms over the desert in summer helps steer the jet stream, influencing storm tracks and temperature patterns across Europe and the Mediterranean. A greener, cooler Sahara would have meant a fundamentally different climate for our ancestors in the north. The case studies are written in the ice of Greenland and Antarctica. Ice core records show that during every green Sahara period, the concentration of dust trapped in the ancient ice plummeted. Less dust in the atmosphere meant more solar energy reached the Earth's surface, contributing to a slight but significant global warming. The desert's condition was a key player in the planet's thermostat. This forces a profound shift in perspective. We often see climate change as a global phenomenon affecting local places. But the story of the Sahara shows us the reverse is equally true. A local environmental shift driven by Earth's orbital wobble, sent shockwaves through the entire climate system. What does that tell us about our own era of rapid change? The river of sand reminds us that no part of our world is an island. The decisions we make about one landscape will inevitably write a new chapter for the entire Earth, a story whose first lines are already being whispered by the wind. Ancient maps drawn by hand in Alexandria or Rome show rivers flowing through the heart of the Sahara, features that European cartographers of a later age would confidently label as fantasy. These were not mere mistakes, but powerful echoes of a truth the mapmakers could not have known. The great geographer Ptolemy, writing in the 2nd century, described a vast river system in Western Africa, a Western Nile that connected to the great river of Egypt. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure legend, the product of distant rumor and imaginative guesswork. We now understand these maps were capturing a profound geological reality, the ghostly outline of the Paleo-Channel network buried under the sand. Mythologist Dr. Jocelyn Godwin suggests that these persistent legends are a form of cultural memory, a poetic understanding of a landscape that was radically different in the not-so-distant human past. The legendary Garden of the Hesperides, said to lie at the western edge of the known world with its golden apples guarded by a dragon, reads like a mythologized account of a lush Saharan oasis, a fertile refuge fed by the hidden waters of a buried river. These stories were not just fanciful tales, they were practical guides. For early 19th century explorers like Mungo Park, the ancient descriptions of a great western river were the primary clues that sent him on his perilous quest to find the true source of the Niger. He was following a map drawn in story, chasing a river that science said could not exist, only to find that the myth was real. His tragic journeys, and those of many others, were driven by a belief that the old tales held a kernel of truth. How many other dismissed legends are waiting for their key, for the right technology or the right question to reveal the reality behind the poetry? These myths are the human heart of the river of sand, the stories we told ourselves to remember a world we had physically forgotten, a world we are only now learning to see again. These vast underground lakes are the Sahara's secret treasure, a non-renewable inheritance from a wetter age. Hydrogeologists call this fossil water, ancient rainfall that seeped into the earth thousands of years ago and was trapped in porous rock layers, creating immense aquifers. This is the liquid legacy of the very rivers that carved the Paleo-Channels, a hidden reservoir that still follows the ghostly contours of those lost waterways. Expert Dr. Mark Giordano describes these aquifers as a bank account where no new deposits are being made, only withdrawals. The most colossal of these is the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System, a sprawling underground sea that lies beneath Egypt, Libya, Sudan, and Chad, holding water that fell as rain during the last ice age. For modern nations, this water is a strategic resource, tapped by deep wells to irrigate desert farmland and supply growing cities. Yet this bounty comes with a profound ethical dilemma. Pumping this ancient water is mining a finite resource, and as the water table drops, the delicate oases that have sustained life for millennia begin to wither and die. The Garamantes understood this balance perfectly. Their Fagara tunnels were a brilliant, low-tech method of harvesting just enough water from the aquifer to sustain their civilization without depleting it recklessly. They lived within the means of their hidden river. A stark geological feature like Egypt's Qattara Depression offers a silent clue to this ancient hydrology. This vast sinking basin is thought to be a terminal sink for a major Paleo-Channel system, a place where entire rivers once poured their water, slowly recharging the colossal aquifer that lies beneath it. Today, that natural recharge has all but ceased, so we must ask ourselves a difficult question. What responsibility do we have to future generations when we decide to drink from a well that will not refill in our lifetime or in 1,000 lifetimes? The water that flows from a modern tap in the desert may have last touched the air when mammoths still walked the earth. It is a reminder that the river of sand still holds a current, not of water, but of time itself, and we are drawing from it with every passing day. A single discipline cannot map a ghost. It takes a chorus of voices, a convergence of geologists, archaeologists, and data scientists, each listening for a different echo in the river of sand. This is the power of interdisciplinary research, where the hard lines between fields blur to reveal a truth no single expert could find alone. The geomorphologist maps the ancient riverbed's shape, the ethnographer records the oral history of a lost oasis, and the remote sensing specialist confirms both with a snapshot from space. Together, they build a bridge of evidence across time. Pioneers like Dr. Kevin White champion this fusion, weaving together disparate threads of data into a single, stronger narrative. In one remarkable project, pollen analysis from deep lake cores provided the raw climate data, the types of plants, and the timing of their disappearance. This biological evidence was then fed into computer models created by climatologists, allowing them to simulate the precise conditions under which the Paleo-Channels thrived and later failed. At the same time, geneticists traced population movements through DNA, their maps of human migration perfectly aligning with the green corridors predicted by the climate models and confirmed by the geology. A landmark example of this synergy is the Trans-Sahara project, a massive undertaking that deliberately bridges the sciences and humanities. Here, a historian's analysis of a medieval Arabic text describing the location of a well can guide a geophysicist to conduct a ground-penetrating radar survey at that exact spot, often revealing the buried structure of a caravan stop. The project does not just collect data, it starts conversations, forcing a satellite imagery analyst to consider the human stories behind a faint line on the screen, and an archaeologist to appreciate the planetary forces that dictated where people could live. How do you solve a puzzle where the pieces are scattered across different rooms, held by different people who speak different professional languages? You build a new room where everyone can work together. This integrated approach turns a collection of facts into a living history. It allows us to understand not just that the Garamantes built fagaras, but why they built them there, how long they could sustain them, and what ultimately forced their descendants to leave. The River of Sand is not just a geological feature or an archaeological site or a climate record. It is all these things at once, a story written in water, stone, and human memory. To read it, we must learn all its languages. The next chapter of the Sahara's story will be written not with shovels, but with quantum sensors and artificial intelligence. A new generation of explorer is emerging, one that treats the entire desert as a single, vast archaeological site, ready to yield its deepest secrets to the most advanced tools we can imagine. Futurists like Dr. Michio Kaku envision a time when space-based LIDAR, deployed from satellites, could map the entire subsurface structure of the Sahara in unprecedented detail, stripping away the sand to reveal a complete, three-dimensional map of every paleo-channel, every buried settlement, and every lost lakebed. We stand on the verge of discoveries that could rewrite human history. Deeper sediment drilling into the most ancient lakebeds could retrieve climate records spanning millions of years, telling us not just about the last Green Sahara, but about dozens of them, each one a potential cradle for earlier, unknown cycles of human development. The role these river corridors played in the very dawn of our species, guiding Homo erectus out of Africa, remains one of the greatest unanswered questions. Vast, unexplored regions like the Tenere Desert in Niger, a literal desert within a desert, are perfect candidates for such revelations. Their extreme remoteness has protected them, leaving their secrets perfectly preserved under trackless seas of sand. Paradoxically, our own era of climate change might also become a tool for discovery, as shifting weather patterns and extreme storms erode the surface in new ways. They could expose ruins and river gravels that have been hidden since the first dunes covered them. What unknown civilizations might have risen and fallen during those earlier humid periods, leaving no trace but a story trapped in the pollen record? The potential finds are limitless, from entire cities that would redefine the scope of African antiquity to detailed records of planetary climate shifts that could inform our own future. Artificial intelligence will be the key that unlocks this treasure chest. Neural networks will be trained to recognize patterns we cannot even perceive, scanning petabytes of satellite data to find the subtle, complex signature of a lost culture hidden within the mineral composition of the soil. The river of sand has guarded its tales for millennia, but the current of inquiry is now flowing faster than ever. It asks us to remain perpetually curious, to wonder what magnificent truth lies just beneath the next dune, waiting for the right mind or the right machine to finally ask its name. The river of sand is a permanent reminder that our world is built upon invisible foundations. Our journey across the dunes has shown us that the most important maps are not always drawn on paper, but are etched into the very bones of the earth, guiding the flow of life long after the water itself is gone. We have traced the ghostly outlines of Paleo-Channels from the silence of space, listened to their echoes in Tuareg oral traditions, and felt their presence in the crumbling walls of a kingdom that mastered the desert. Each clue, from a satellite's radar to a child's toy found in the dust, has woven a single story of how climate and geography are the silent partners in every human endeavor. The rise and fall of empires, the exchange of gold for salt, the very paths our ancestors walked out of Africa, all were shaped by this hidden landscape. This is not merely a story about the past. It is a profound lesson in resilience and adaptation, a testament to the human spirit's ability to thrive by understanding the world beneath its feet, even when that world is completely concealed. The fate of the Garamantes, who built a civilization on fossil water only to see it vanish, speaks directly to our own time. It asks us what foundations we are building upon today and what legacy we will leave for those who come after us. The mysteries of the Sahara are a call to protect our fragile heritage, both cultural and environmental, and to look deeper into the landscapes we inhabit. What hidden history in your own part of the world is waiting to be uncovered? If this journey through the river of sand has captivated you, I invite you to share your thoughts below. What lost civilization or forgotten pathway fascinates you the most? For more journeys into the unknown, subscribe and join me as we continue to unravel the secrets buried just beneath the surface together.